masyadong enjoy. Magandang umaga sa inyong lahat. We are embarking on maybe the theme for this workshop and the other one after would be sort of carry over from one of the themes before, no? Which is well-being. Diba? Kasi we're gonna see a health. Actually, parang ano lang. Para pala kami ni Adrian. Kaya ako na-late kasi naligo ako. Hindi pwedeng hindi. Tapos, nandiyan ako sa baba, I was still wearing bedroom slippers and realized. Tapos panic na ako, tumawag na eh. So I had to go back up to wear proper shoes. Sensible shoes.
Just like a lesbian.
Yes. Pero hindi naman Merrell ang brand. Sketch.
Grabe.
Adidas naman.
Grabe.
Ay, sobra. Bedroom slippers talaga siya, yung may yung parang ano siya, parang may bunny. Hindi ba bagay? I'm just trying to make light, kasi medyo in the spirit of the story, no? One story. It's the approach to tackle something otherwise quite serious, no? And we have two stories. They are unified by that theme, no, of HIV /AIDS, which you guys are young, no? When Ronald Baitan and I, thank you Ronald for sitting beside me, we're the same generation more or less, and we arrived in the scene of gayness around the same time in the early 1990s, and AIDS was a death sentence, and there was this whole body of gay literature, gay writing that was devoted to that. We have a guest here. His name, he was the cutest guest we had the other time, diba? What's his name? Evan? Alright, Evan and I met because of an interview that he was asked to conduct with me by Teen Magazine, for which he used to work. He has since quit, I think, working for Teen.
Brother Team Dissolve.
Team Dissolve, no more Teen?
Online na lang.
Okay. And I'm looking for it. I'm going to do a bit of a presentation first, no? Because I would like us to contextualize Adrian's writing. I have to look for it, my God. Can't find it. Sorry, I'm not prepared. No, I am. It's just, ano lang sa book. Okay. The interview was about me being one of the early sort of like movers in the movement. This was in 2016, in interview, 2017. And he was asking me about how it was to be gay then and now. I felt so awful kasi ang cute-cute ni Eva, di ba? Sabi ko, you're othering me. I am not of your generation. And you kept asking me questions that reminded you about that. And it's kind of true, he is younger, but not very much. He's 34 now. Diba? It's a nice age. And I had to say that one of the sort of basic differences between then and now was this epidemic. I mean, we in the 1990s were aware of the epidemic and how awful and at the time lethal it was. But all the figures coming in from the epidemiologists were pointing to a sector that did not really directly impact on us or touch us. It was straight, cisgendered OFW men coming back from their employment, you know, normally in the Middle East, with or if they were working as seamen anywhere in the world, and bringing back the virus and infecting their wives. That was the story we were hearing with Dulzura Cortez and the other one. Dalawa yung lumabas na films about that.
Sarah Jane.
Sarah Jane. And we didn't have a gay face to it. Even if Ronald and I, who were very sort of like active in the community, we're hearing stories now of fellow gay men who were in fact HIV positive or already suffering from full-blown AIDS. And we were protecting ourselves against that prospect. So there was Library Foundation that Tasing now heads. At the time, Tasing was just one like us lang. We were invited to take part in these workshops. No? These were weekend workshops held in a resort, like normally in Pansol. And basically, they were composed of yuppies, gay yuppies, professional young gay men. And we talked about how to protect ourselves from AIDS. And so that was how the campaign was happening. And we were, while we were kind of babad sa AIDS awareness, it was still a remote possibility. So when I got interviewed by Evan, I had to say that na times have changed because what we were fearing then is now here. And the epidemic is here. And we were, as older gay men, feeling somewhat dismayed that none of the efforts we had made seemed to have worked to protect the younger generation of MSM, men who have sex with men. Although that's actually, sabi nila, behavioral category, it's a label. When you say man, lalaki, hindi na bakla yun. Sabi ko, I wanted them to change their perspective na parang, baguhin nyo, yung gamitin yung categories na ginagamit on the ground. Kasi baka hindi ma-reach si parlorista, hindi ma-reach si pa-girl, kasi hindi naman siya man who has sex with another man. It's a bakla having sex with a lalaki, di ba? So anyway, behaviorally, that was supposed to be how the most neutral way of saying it. But none of our efforts seem to have worked because now we have this full-blown crisis. It is a crisis. We are the leading country now in terms of seroconversions, rates of seroconversion in the Asia-Pacific region. That includes Thailand. Yes, in terms of rates, in the absolute figures, it will be hard to catch up with Thailand in terms of absolute figures. But in terms of rate, meaning weekly or monthly increase, tayo yung nakakaloka. I think the Department of Health is now saying around 3,200 cases a day now. Something like that. Yun na yung registered number. Well, there was...
32.
No, pag nangyari, nagkaroon sila ng 32 a day, so a month siguro. Sorry. 3,000 200 cases a month. Sorry, very Ultima. Sorry, very Ultima. Ultima talaga. Ultima! Okay, sorry. Oy, that's a lot. Ano? That's a whole lot.
One every hour.
One every hour. And if you think about it, one life affected by it affects more than one life. Kasi may context yung mga yan. May pamilya yan, may mga connections yan, meron yan sexual network. Diba? So, I told Evan, that's a burden that your generation seems to be facing, that our generation luckily escaped. And the demographics are saying na nasa young sector talaga yung density ng cases eh. And I felt kind of sad about that when Evan, of course, I couldn't Crayola ko in front of Evan para magpa-cute. Cute talaga, hindi na mag-answer ng question eh. Kasi diba, titignan mo na lang siya. May pagkasama yung obvious, diba? Cute talaga. Pero you know, when he was here speaking, parang pag ganun pa siya taga nagsasalita, parang nawawala yung cuteness.
True!
Ha? Oo, sorry. Pero kasi di ba, nung ako in-interview, ako lang yung daldal. So, kita ko sa kanya. Nung siya rin daldal, ko ay. No, hello.
Totoo.
Kahit ano pa, di ba? Yung mga gano'n, mga medyo vocally challenged, huwag na lang pagsalitain, di ba? Serve na lang ng serve tayo. I'm kidding. But, yes. So that for me is the context with which to approach the stories of Adrian, which are about HIV. They are related to each other because of that theme, But they're very different stories in terms not only of their characters, but also in terms of their approach to the topic. The first story is more conventional. It is it's a domestic story. At the heart of it is really the longing for the mother. I mean, in my opinion, it's about mother-son. And the character Duke is almost incidental to that, no? It has a motive of traveling, and it has creative writing siya, marunong siya magtapo ng metaphor, no? So meron siyang the metaphor of neon lights, which in the beginning is there, towards the end recurs, no? That's the kind of story that it is. And it does accomplish, I think, one of the main missions of what used to be AIDS literature before the breakthrough. When Ronald and I were teaching gay literature in our younger days, we would devote a segment in the syllabus to talking about AIDS through the wonderful AIDS writing being produced by people like Paul Manet, Mark Doty, Andrew Holleran, and maybe Larry Kramer. Mga big names namin na idol ang gagaling ng mga writers, no? Writing about this big crisis of Amistad Mopon, okay? The shift in the writing about AIDS happened when AIDS became treatable. It's really an ontological break. In fact, nawala na yung gravitas, nawala na yung absolute seriousness ng literature before. Kasi pwede na siyang, it's like a chronic illness that you can actually live with for the rest of your life. It's like something you take simply maintenance medicine for. Parang gano'n, no? So it's the same as hypertension. I'm sorry. There's hypertension, there's diabetes, what else? Erectile dysfunction. Something like that. No, manager, you can live with it, no? So nawala na actually, pag natuturo na akong ilit ngayon, isa na lang ang natira yan. I'm just including a little bit of Mark Doty now to talk about, kasi a poet siya, ang ganda na language, to sort of pay homage to AIDS writing during its heyday. Ngayon, hindi na heyday. Hindi na siya heyday. Now we are seeing another aspect of it. Why is AIDS writing necessary? Because it is necessary to get the information out there on how to protect yourself from it. So whether Adrian intended it or not, every time a Filipino writer, gay writer particularly, writes about HIV/AIDS here, merong ganong dimension ng work niya of getting the information out there, a little bit of a cautionary tale, right? And counseling, in a way. You are giving counsel to your reader. You're not just talking about the disease and its impact, you're also telling the reader, don't get it. Try not to get it. Diba? So we see that in the two stories. The first one, a little implicit, or not subtly. The second one, medyo camp over the top. Huwag kasing magpasiguls sa loob ng LRT. Diba? At sumama all the way. Gano'n, diba? Whether you like it or not, nandun siya, nakapasok siyang gano'n. Okay? This is drawn from a real-world situation, these two stories. They come from the news, they come from probably personal experience, one's own or one's friends. You are drawing your material from the crisis that now exists. So we can call this a kind of crisis writing. No? And as such, maybe we need to sort of recalibrate some of our reactions. Kasi meron siyang ina-address na crisis. No? Yung AIDS literature noon, marami doon hindi maganda, if you think about it. Kasi, like Mopon, kind of sentimental. Tapos, you go to, let's say, Larry Kramer, masyadong galit. Mga ganon, di ba? Iba-iba, mga extreme. Pero, acceptable kasi may urgency. Diba? So may ganun siyang qualification in a way na some gestures can be somewhat exaggerated, somewhat over the top because precisely there is something urgent being discussed. Now, I will ask Adrian to describe the context for these two stories because he is taking an MA with us and his two stories come from a prospective thesis which he's in the process of completing. I asked him last night, very briefly, wala kami halos kasing session na nag-usap kami, dyan lang habang kumakain. Sabi ko sa kanya, since nakapag-usap kami pala beforehand the other night there, over tequila, na pwedeng ikwento niya ng konti yung kanyang thesis. Kasi meron na siyang outline. At I think marami na rin work na na-compose. Nakuha na niya yung course na Poetics with a teacher, one of our teachers, si Ching B. At dinescribe lang sa Poetics yung project niya. So hindi talaga siya hugot from thin air. Meron siyang existing writing na that can in fact put everything in the right frame or context. No? I'm saying that because while the formalist workshop would say, no, the work stands on its own. Hindi na the formalist eh. In fact, we have transcended formalism. We're not neglecting it. We're still reacting to form, aren't we? But we understand more holistically what it means to write. And particularly what it means to write as an LGBTQ person. Diba? That's the value added of our workshop. And I think you will remember that. Each time you sort of look back on your workshop paglalagari, kasi mga lagarista yung marami dito, yung isa-isa na tinitik off lahat yung mga workshops, no? Iba to, kasi hindi lang yung sinulat ninyo ang iniisip natin. Iniisip natin, buhay rin eh. Iniisip natin yung career ninyo, more or less, as an LGBTQ writer. Iniisip natin yung advocacy ninyo, iniisip natin yung politika ninyo, iniisip natin yung mga posibilidad, no? Na hindi lang contained in your manuscript, kung hindi yung sarili ninyong pananaw. No? Kaya naririnig natin naman, nagkikwento naman tayo. No? So Adrian will now spend the next 30 minutes, no? 10 minutes. How many
defending his thesis.
Depends on how fast they speak.
It depends on how fast he speaks. No? So he will place these stories in the right sort of context. No? So Adrian.
Hi, good morning. I'm going to read from sections of my essays, and then I'm going to talk a little after that. Although I do want to preempt, I don't necessarily want to talk to about these two specific stories. I want to talk about them after all the comments. I'll just contextualize from where I am coming. Where I'm coming. So the stories I have been writing towards my prospective thesis as I pursue my master's degree in creative writing revolve around PLHID characters. This stems not only from my concerns as a gay Filipino, but also from my desire to explore possibilities in such fiction. HIV/AIDS literature has historically concerned death. Some writers, though, have explored the subject from a lens of life instead, which I believe grants broader opportunities in the fictive genre. It is within this particular literary subconstellation that I wish to belong, not to write PLHID characters with their deaths in mind, but rather to write the possibilities of their lives on the page with the assumption for the reader that they will go on living well after the final words of each short story. From this lens of life, I hope I can better explore that effervescent L in the PLHID acronym. It is through this lens that I attempted to write the stories that we are going to be taking up today. This project, as I go on to populate more stories with PLHID characters, will remain largely personal as a Mobius strip kind of situation. Because as I write how my characters can live instead of writing them to die, I go on with my own corporeal life inspired by the characters, whose fictional lives I imagine, elaborate, and examine, and as such, inspiring possibilities that I can write for them in their stories. To put it slightly more simply, I write inspired by the potential in my characters' lives, and in writing their stories, I am inspired to go on living, and doing what living for me entails, which is to write my character stories.
That's very profound. To live through your fiction.
I think it was 2 days ago, I made this comment on Ralph's story with HIV na bakit gumugo na ang mundo palagi. And I've been really thinking about that comment for the past few days because the fact is it can be a traumatic experience and it can be a tragedy. And we write it because that is the feeling. What I wish to achieve with my work is what happens after. How do we live after? How do we live after the tragedy, or how do we live with the trauma? So, okay, I'll stop it. Thank you.
What? You can.
Tapos na? Mahaba-haba ng essay mo for Trinity. You know that? I think that's enough.
Yung decision dun sa yung stylistic choice, like
Okay, so we start the ball rolling na. That's all he wants to say for now. He would like us to bear down on the 2 stories. And then I'm sure he will still elaborate some more because he did say artfully, meaning contemplatively, thoughtfully, right? Mindfully. So mindfulness is what I mean, really. Okay, so let's now open the floor for our discussion on Adrian's 2 stories. As happened before, we will shuttle between story 1 and 2. We will focus on one rather than the other, but we will address both projects, no? Or both stories. Can we hear from the fellows, please? I'm just going to volunteer you, kasi magsasalita. Ni Bruce, madalda.
Yeah, I like the first story very much. Kasi it went through the detail of Sunny and Duke, both characters having HIV. But it's something incident. I wouldn't say incidental, it's just a part of them. It does not define them, and I really like that. These are people with this condition. And they have, it is a problem, but they have bigger problems as well. For example, Sonny's relationship with his mother. That was his circumstances, his medical circumstances are profound, but this emotional circumstance that he has is more, it's more profound than that. And that gives the characters these three dimensions to them. Tapos dagdag pa yung the relationship that Duke and Sonny has, which makes me want to take a look at it, but I'd rather not, because I'd rather look at Sonny and his mother than Sonny and this guy that he is with in this place that he wants to share with his mother, in a way.
That is the puzzle, isn't it? We don't know what their relationship is. I mean, Sonny seems to have been asked by Duke to join him there. Duke seems to be the one who is more or less upwardly mobile with the cash. Sonny seems to be not as rich as Duke. Sonny is decidedly not attracted to Duke. It's mentioned there in a really awful way. Parang absolutely no desire. Okay? But they are unified or united by this similar condition of being afflicted with this condition. But they have different journeys in a way, no? One journey supposedly to Hong Kong, but Sonny, who is the center of the story, who will experience the epiphany, in fact, is on another quest, no? To look for his mother, from whom he has been alienated somewhat, but who has actually been there all along as the person who put him up and basically made sure he would have an education and all of that. There is the little implication that the mother is in Hong Kong for economic reasons. We're not sure if that is so. May sympathy si Sonny sa mga DH So, hindi natin alam, baka DH si mommy. Hindi na in-spell out, maganda rin yun. Kasi kung maganda yun, the actual avoidance of that detail makes you think about his own misgiving and his own probably apprehension about reconciling himself with the fact na katulong mami ko. Parang gano'n, di ba? May gano'n siyang sort of effect on the reader. But Nimrus, you like this story more because it is a relatable story. In the sense that while HIV is in the story, it is actually just something that the characters happen to have, but it is not what defines who they are. So that is one approach, I think, to the project, no, that Adrian has undertaken, which is to make the condition of having HIV simply one out of many characteristics that a person may have in this life. It should not, in fact, define you, even if you have it. You can still be what you want to be, do what you want to do, right? Even if you have this virus or this infection. Okay, so any more reactions? Yes. Okay.
I think Ultima Twink is also the central figure in Ultima Twink is not HIV either, it's consent. The fact that the protagonist was molested in the train and was, I don't know, coerced, raped, really, were consequences of his self-loathing or because of HIV. So,
No, he didn't have HIV before that rape.
He did.
He already did.
He did. So, the train ride with the groper and the rape both happened because he was unwilling to assert himself, I feel. Because he felt very deprived as a person living with HIV. So, in the same manner that the neon blindness used the presence of the virus in the protagonist's body. They themselves are not the obstacle or the monster that we need to overcome. I think that's why Ultima Twink is so victorious for me, because we need to have these discussions on consent.
And on self-loathing.
And our incapacity to resist because of our perceptions of ourselves. Actually, and then I brought up neon blindness yesterday during Sigrid's session because meron ding yung relationship between Sunny and Luke is also itself questionable because how do we perceive? Of course, we don't see them having sex or anything. Pero meron pa rin our perceptions on solicitation, extortion, is itself a question of consent. What capacity does the person being solicited have to resist the advances of a person with obviously more power? Kasi assertion of power yung purchasing. So, in totality, diba? Para lang maglagaw ng aking mga nakita or nasipat sa mga aktor ko.
Sige pa.
Sa halip na tumutok sa HIV, mas nakita ko yung capacity ng HIV para i-magnify yung mga issues na meron sa pakikitungo natin mga bakla sa mga katulad nating bakla. Consent pa rin, isa parehong akda.
Maraming salamat. I'd like Adrian to take note of questions and to also make sure he reacts to the comments you're giving him. Sort of like clear in the reactions of both Nimrose and Cupcake is their admiration for the story's use of HIV simply as one circumstance out of many circumstances that the characters have, and that this is in fact probably one way to accomplish the mission that Adrian has set out for himself. So what they're implicitly saying is that if Adrian's presentation a while back were to be the standard, meaning he wants to write about characters who are people living with HIV in order to show how they can still live rather than how they will die, right? Then the way to do it is precisely to make their condition of having HIV simply a facet or one circumstance out of many, you know? And still put them on journeys that are human journeys that any character would go through or might go through, whether he or she has the virus or not. And maybe related to that is a question that I want to pose to Adrian. Is there any story in the perspective collection you're writing where HIV takes center stage? Where you have a character who is entirely crushed and more or less determined by this diagnosis? It's also worth doing, that kind of story, because there are, in the real world, individuals who, upon getting diagnosed, become entirely immobilized, right, by it. And if you want a collection, this will be the first one, I would think, of short stories in English about HIV/AIDS, to be more or less comprehensive or to be substantive, then probably you should represent all the different reactions that people being diagnosed with this illness have had toward the diagnosis. So, meron ka bang kwento where the point of diagnosis is in fact the central event? And that would be nice. Kasi hindi natin nakita yung point of diagnosis itong dalawang central characters na to. Tanong natin kay Adrian, meron ka bang naisip na kwento na ma-accomplish pa rin yung mission mo that there is still life, right? Pero nakita natin yung actual handing down of that sort of sentence, di ba? That now you have to live with the virus, okay? Choice is, of course, implicit already in the acronym people living with HIV, right? You live with it. That's the choice being offered you by that description, right? The other choice is to die with it. And maybe that's another question. We have characters who choose to die with a condition, diba? And it can still be a way to promote the agenda of living with it. You understand? By having a character who in fact cannot live with it. Alright? More reactions?
Can I add another request?
This is our analysis.
Will there be text concerning dating and love and erotica?
Yeah, I would like maybe to ask Adrian if he has any stories where PLHIV are actually dramatized, depicted as still having sex and being sexually person living with HIV. Pusit, can we just say pusit?
That's derogatory.
Ay, di ba?
Is it? But they own it.
Yeah,
You
they
own it?
own it, pero...
Sorry, the baklang
People
kanal.
who don't have it, you can't call them.
The baklang kanal are okay with baklang kanal. Why can't we just say,
I can
Ano,
say that, but you can't.
Oo.
the baklang kanal?
They yung...
Joke lang.
Kasi, people living with HIV usually address themselves as pussy. Pero yung...
Isn't it an exercise in empathy to just basically do the same here?
I don't know.
We might as well
I don't know everything I would say.
mag-correct na sa mga Becky.
Correct.
Something like shorter than people living with HIV. Hindi ko naman sa PLHF, it's you stumble over it. Can we just say,
Say live.
ha?
Live.
Live na lang. Sige.
Oh.
Basta something shorter, please.
This a dangerous behavior among gay men is outing people's hero status. And
Ayan.
usually,
May story ka ba dyan about ano?
usually yun yung yung ginagamit na point finger.
Okay, so are there posy characters of yours who actually, just to affirm your agenda of life, no? Who actually are still sexual, entirely sexual, and enjoying sex? Diba? Ang challenge, kasi the reality of the posies is as diverse as the reality of anyone who is not a posy.
Yeah.
Right? So, parang medyo similar both as Joanna in terms of a single agenda, na parang, ay, naku, we need to do this because we need to put a face to this reality, or faces to this reality, and we need to try to cover everything. So Joanna has fisting and fingering and everything already there. Kino-cover mo lahat. Meron, I suppose may erotic friendship there, a story. Iba-iba. Diba?
Hindi pa kompleto.
Oo.
Pero hindi ko maninisip na dapat lahat nandun. Kasi I hope it's not the only volume.
Can we say the same, maybe caution Adrian against wanting to do everything at once? So, konti lang, what you can manage. Kasi think about it, there are posies who are old, and posies who are very young, posies who are kanal, and posies who are opposite of kanal.
Banal.
Kanal?
Meron din.
Posies who are OFWs, posies who are in the province, posies who are in the religious sector. Can you imagine a priest who is posy? Yes, I can. That would be a wonderful story. You would have to do. Or a nun who is posy, di ba? A lesbian nun who is posy. Ayan, dagdagan mo siya ng margins.
Grabe.
Bongga yun, di ba? Lesbian na nun, tapos posy.
Si WP na rin.
Tapos
fanfic ang tawag ko.
Hindi, ay, that can be done. Oh my God.
Fanfic yun.
Si Meth had na nun. Okay, Luna.
Sister Batong pa.
Ano siya? I don't recommend this.
Literal.
Can you just use your voice? Because the mic is really superfluous.
I love yung physical setting of the story.
Wala. Can we have please, tech support?
Oo, na it's located in Hong Kong, and we know that Hong Kong is experiencing its own crisis right now.
Tapos na yung
Political
crisis.
Isa ba?
The bill has been jumped. Wala na siya.
Pero,
The extradition bill?
wait, yung extradition bill, di ba?
Wala na. It's dead.
Pero ang gusto kong i-point out doon, yung autonomy nung mga taga Hong Kong dun sa China, pwede ko pang paglaruan dun sa autonomy ni Sami dun sa disease. Parang meron siyang connection dun sa story mo na implicit and can be highlighted if you like, just to show the political nature of the disease itself. Neo blindness, mas may resonance sa akin yung story rather than the second one. Siguro kasi hindi ako familiar dun sa language at saka dun sa world of the second story. I did enjoy the crazy, frenetic pace of the second piece. Pero ang feeling ko habang binabasa ko siya, parang not equipped critically to attack it or to read it. Yung word na attack masyadong strong, engage with it. So, nanatili ako dun sa Ano ba yan? Sa first story.
Wala pa rin.
May caps.
Kaya mga games na lang, narinig naman.
Oh, so, ang napansin kong motif dun sa work ko, merong parang may walk-out pattern si Sunny dun sa base. Yung first night nila, umuulan. Pero lumabas siya dun sa hotel. Tapos significant sa akin yung ulan, yung umbrella, syempre, ibang kahulugan sa Hong Kong. It's not only a rain year, but also a wet one. So, nagpunta siya dun sa malapit na 7-Eleven. Parang hinahanap talaga niya yung sarili niya. Pero yung, meron siyang trip dun sa streets of Hong Kong alone, na kung saan nagsisigaw siya. Parang dun sa, parang 219 yata. So, hindi ko maalala yung page. Pero nagsisigaw siya doon. At yung important yung scene na yun para sa akin. Kasi may epiphany of sorts yung character yung sa kanyang kalagayan.
Went to a house, an empty house.
Yes. Parang yun primal house or kung ano-ano yun. Nag-make sense sa akin yung how yung dun sa avoidance ng DH. Kahit hindi mo sinabi, sinassume ko na meron siya talagang personal connection dun sa domestic worker. Kasi posible talaga na magaling kayo sa DH. Ngayon, para lang, katulad dun sa Hong Kong yung autonomy, pwede mo rin ikabet yung pagiging DH ng nanay niya dun sa parang pagiging DH niya dun sa kasama niya. Kasi parang lahat na lang binayaran mo kasi.
Tsaka nung nakita niya yung brand, yung mga damit ni
Hindi na niya linabas yung damit niya, di ba? So parang meron siyang shabby feeling, shabby clothes.
Siya yung kanal.
Siya yung kanal na ang ganda-ganda nung yung aspect. Gusto ko lang mas ibigay yung inequality kahit na pareho sila ng business. And finally, napaka-effective yung metaphor, objective correlative ng botelya na walang label, na lagi nakapil, hindi tatak. Kasi pagtanggap na merong sakit, pero ayaw nilalahin yung label. So that for me works as simple. To those sense of person.
Maraming salamat, Luna. Luna's observation that there is a parallelism between the relationship that Sunny has with the fate of the mother, in that the sense that they're both more or less in an economically sort of disadvantaged position in relation to their present circumstance, is in the story. But what Luna's saying is to emphasize it more and to make it less implicit and more explicit. Baka naman Luna kasi mawala yung sense of understatement. Na parang yung poignancy niya nandun na. Thinking it's there. Maybe one more little detail. It can be just one object or something. We see it in the fact that gusto niyang i-capture yung mga post ng nanay niya with the same backdrop. Alam natin parang nagka-affect na siya, nag-identify na siya with the mother that way. And the mother is still there, looking for the mother in the end. Although that may be a symbolic statement, looking for my mother in the sense of trying to understand her more, but she's no longer there.
Psychologically absent.
So it's an OFW story. HIV is in it, but it's not the center concern. So yun yung strategy niya for that. Ultima twink, while the main issue is self-worth, right? Mas malapit-lapit si HIV sa gitna. Hindi siya medyo center stage, pero katabi lang niya yung nasa center stage, no? Ito talaga HIV is somewhere in the back. Okay? Yes, Jimmy.
I like the first story.
At the same time, let me comment on the second one, no? Natuwa ako sa kanya, postmodern siya, di ba? Self-deprecating, irony, all the elements of camp are there. right? How he pokes fun at the host industry. I would like to comment though, but maybe on the last part. Diba? Kasi the last part, ano na siya eh, no? Very earnest. I think it's too much. Now, if you ask me, pwede ka make it earnest, but how do we camp it up? Make it too earnest that it becomes a performance. Get me? In short, lalabas, na-conscious din siya sa kanyang acting. Parang hindi ko nakita kasi. Parang nakulangan ako dun sa, sa ending. No? Kasi kung talaga ang mode mo, eh, yung postmodern, you have to examine the self, right? It has to be more self-conscious, right? More ironic, parang earnest too much. Baka pwedeng bawasan, or push to the max that it becomes, ironic. I think let's maximize the elements of camp. To actually, para mas mabuo yung kwento. Kasi ganda-ganda, nakakatuwa siya eh. And I love twinks. Maganda yung kwento. Maganda ang approach niya. Maganda kasi sa kanya, dalawa. I mean, nakita mo yung technical prowess ng writer. Kaya niya iba-ibang modes.
I think that was deliberate when Adrian submitted, he wanted both kinds of storytelling represented. Probably representing two different talents he has. He can do both. Very multi-talented.
Commendable yung polyphonic the form, I mean, the polyphony, that's very, very important. And I think it works. Okay, for me, the only understanding, ang ganda-ganda, and congratulations.
And may I disagree with Ronald on the problem of the ending? I think that it makes it very Pinoy. How camp cannot be for camp's sake. The way we have practiced camp is that it actually is serious in the end. Hindi natin kaya yung talagang John Waters camp lang na talagang divine na ang ending nga is sinabot siya napakalang lobster sa picnic post. Walang point. We always end up with an earnest statement. Diba? Like Jack says at Tuna, do you remember? Yung lumabas na sa Kakanin Factory after this showdown with Sarah Femina Swanesteller Baru and the Planetary Women, natalo na ni Ada. Nung lumabas siya, dala-dala siya ni Dodong, merong malaking monologue si Dodong about very earnest about the oppression of the gay person throughout history. It is a moment of seriousness in an otherwise very over-the-top comical thing. Pinoy. Mahirap talagang all the way camp, papasok si melodrama kahit paano.
Yeah, pero bakit kailangan sa ending? Pwede naman...
Ronald, hindi naman ganun kalaki yung seriousness eh.
Yeah.
Chika pa rin siya kasi it's still oo at Charo. Ganun pa rin naman siya, it's still...
Yeah, I think still pa rin.
It's not too much of a problem. We can have opinions about that. Is the ending too serious? Did it detract from the fun of everything? Kasi nag-high point yung hallucination niya eh. Tapos dawn comes. So meron siya parang pagod na siya. Kasi isip niya, ano ba, how am I now actually? How am I really doing? And then nagano siya ng chika-chika na parang, all my strength, persistence. It's still tongue-in-cheek, Ronald. It's still there. Pero pinasok na niya yung konting seriousness. Kasi in the end, gusto nga sabihin siguro ng writer na may point naman yung kwento ko. Serious?
Friendship over na.
Serious naman yan.
Friendship over na.
Ha? Ay, nag-aaway na kami. Hello? O, take it back na ako. Sige, ikaw na. Ganun talaga mo. O, sige. Concede. I like it. No, all I'm saying is I like it thoroughly. No issues with it. Diba all, maybe I want that the critique of the kababawan of Channel 2 and said all of that, the kabaklaan of showbiz to be cramped up some more. Siguro yun lang. Gusto ko pa ng mas devastating critique of the stupidity of the stars. Sorry, di ba? Highly paid, pero mga walang nothing between the ears. Mga ganyan, di ba? I like that. And you're working, you're intelligent. She was intelligent. working in a place like that. You know, we graduate people in the CW program and yun ang kanilang employment. Tapos, pag nagre-reunion kami minsan, kinikwento nila kung gaano they have to dumb themselves down. And nag-MA yung iba kasi, ganito ito best reason for, why are you back for more CW? I want to remember how I am not stupid. Because walang ginawa kundi stupid things in the network, yung plastikan, yung kababawan, yung puro palengke to, puro baklaan, na hindi naman, na bakla naman sila or fagag sila, pero talaga, kasi pera, puro kaperahan. Puro kaperahan. Everything is pera. Bitter ba bitter? No, pero yun, gusto ko pa yun ng konti kasi critique siya eh. So in other words, ang dami mong pwedeng sapulin. Diba? You're doing the HIV thing, that sort of, you know, which puts it in the context of your thesis, but you're also making commentary on this kind of culture that exists, no? Ang laki ng power ng mga networks.
Both stories talk about corporate reality. Ibig sabihin na yung how the virus is embodied. The characters in the place, the locations, or even in the story themselves. May a variety of stories tayo dito, may a variety of people, characters, a variety of infections and transmissions and rechanneling. So it's really talking about intimacies and social relations produced by the virus. It's there, it's incidental, but it's also integral. I mean, the stories would not have come out without the impetus of the virus. Various medications. So these are very intelligent stories, and precisely because it talks about the conditions of the possible. I mean, within this kind of reality, what is still doable in terms of life choices, in terms of death wishes, etc. So parang may kind of exploration or cataloging din na nagaganap dito sa mga stories. That kind of curation din of sense, of sorts about bodies, about things that can, things that the virus can tap into to take on a unique kind of form. So, lives that can be born from this kind of transmission. Ang suggestion ko lang well, hindi naman suggestion. It reminds me of yung klase ng curation na ginawa din ni Irving Welsh in terms of drugs and hindi naman pejorative ang thing as train spotting or porno. It really creates a kind of worlding, very intelligent and very specific to particular kinds of class of Scotland classes. So it's very grounded. But the first story that is a quest for the mother, Filipino going to the Hong Kong, reminds me of days of being wild in Hong Kong Wild. Pero dito reverse naman, Hong Kong nationals, both men, coming into the Philippines and looking for an imagined mother na hindi pinakilala itong nanay na to sa Pilipinas, sa journey pa all the way sa people via train habang namamasay siguro. So very interesting yung and it reminds me of that kind of moment. It's also very filmic when you see the mga stories mo, both stories mo. Yung second story naman reminds me of yung Shining Liang, it's a Taiwanese music director, which also does staging of productions within the musical numbers about HIV, etc. within the film itself. So parang may characters na filmic quality at may staging ba na leading all the way siya like all musicals, the biggest musical portion is the final ending. All musicals are about the staging of the final musical number. So kailangan i-lead up lang doon na hindi siya takot na may attempts na staging at kind of production level that leads to the final musical when the final letter leading sa So So it may be also interesting for you to watch these films because you draw from that kind of, parang nilirealize mo lang din ito mga unang experience ako into this kind of newer social reality. But yung groundedness pa, both when it comes to Hong Kong and Taiwan and the Philippines, very metropolitan din. Pwede mo rin at mahilig naman sa intertext yung sa second one, script ka, dual reading pictures descript na nabasa mo, tapos may pictures ako na actual na nangyayari sa kapag mga tao na mas interesting kaysa dun sa lines na read out na act out, yan may conflict ko na video, ibigay mo po, yan pa rin parang online editing, pintura ng mga sections ito, etc. So it's very interesting na sa kind of textuality, kung maaari ko mismo pinagawa which is really
First, it turns itself off on its own, which is weird. Or battery, no? Yeah. Thank you, Roland. But I think a question to ponder in relation to Roland's suggestion on how on for grounding elements, no, is whether within the postmodern story framework, such new critical expectations and standards are still required. I think there's a looseness in the structure of the postmodern story that actually permits the use or the non-use of the device of foreshadowing and organic unity in general. No? Yung looseness of structure ng Ultima Twink is actually its nature itself as that kind of a story. The unifying element is the voice of Chico. It's Chico the whole time, di ba? And so the focus on one character, his consciousness, is what anchors you, and the text, and the form of the text can meander and wander in this direction and that. And I think hindi ako masyadong troubled na yung production number ay hindi na foreshadow. Kasi with a name like Ultima Twink, papunta ka na rin yung sorry, you call yourself Ultima Twink, kailangan may dance number ka. Di ba? At yun, ang dance number nga siya. What I think I would like heighten in relation again to my suggestion of emphasizing further the critique of the entertainment industry is how such a critique actually complements the central the problematizing of the central issue of self-worth. Kasi Chico, you lose your self-worth if you work in the entertainment industry. First of all, the diagnosis deprives you of that. Di ba? Bababatingin mo sa sarili mo kasi yung imaging ng HIV, ganyan. Pero hindi lang yun. Nagtatrabaho ka sa network. Talagang mapapasarili mo. Kaya tingin mo sa sarili mo unless mag-i-update ka ulit sa page ng creative writing sa amin. Kaya talaga we will remind you how you used to be. Diba? Imagine, alam mo sila, ito sila, yung mga student namin na gumagawa ng mga kwento ng mga telenovela. Tapos nakikita ko kung ano yung mga kwento na. Ano nga ba kami tinuro sa inyo? Hindi naman nila pwedeng gawin ng ganung kwento. You know how telenovelas are made, right? They are begin with the stars. Tapos sabi ka ni Charo, kailangan ng project na ngayon. Turn na ngayon ni Kim Chu. Diba? Kasi tapos na yung tapos na kay Catherine. Ganun yun may stable sila ng stars, duty bound ng network to keep giving them shows. And you build it around that. So anong gagawin natin ng Kim Chu? Di ganyan. Sige, api-api mo na siya. Mga ganyan, di ba? So ganun, those are the givens you work with. So nakakawala ng self-worth, di ba? If you are a creative writer. So magandang i-heighten yun. And then, someone else is supposed to ignore that. Useless talaga siya.
Titilin na lang ako.
Oo.
Ano yun? Oo, gusto ko yung pareho ko gusto yung kwento ni Adrian. No? Parehong HIV person yung character. Pero magkaiba ang atake. So, nasabi naman yun. Gusto ko lang i-hide, gusto ko lang sabihin yung pagiging quiet and yung sensitive ng kwento. No? Yun nga, sabi mo yung paloob, yung journey is paloob. At hindi ko naman ibig sabihin na i-compare, no? Pero yung in terms of craft siguro, yung rendering na matters a lot. Kahapon kasi yung dun sa mga batang kanal, no, ang daming binibigay sa atin na information, ang daming action, very dynamic. No? Pero ito naman, napaka-quiet, sensitive, pero para sa akin, pareho yung effect, no? Yung empathy dun sa character, at saka yung lumilitaw yung dignidad ng tao. So hindi, in fact, hindi awa yung nag-generate ng pakiramdam sa akin dun sa character na ito. Kundi yun, yung empathy at saka yung respeto dun sa kanila, no? Doon sa Ultima Twink, dugtungan ko na lang yung sinabi rin ni Neil na yung commentary doon sa TV network, maalaala mo kaya. May nakita ako kasi na paano nakikita ni Ultima Twink, ni Chico, yung kanyang sarili bilang person with HIV, at kung paano nakikita niya na ina-exploit siya ng network and how the network exploits the vulnerability of people at dun sa mga programs nila. So, meron akong nakikita na meron siyang ganun sipa dun sa industry where he works. You know? And similar yung sa akin, no? Yung respeto sa kanya. Dun sa neon, sa unang kwento, kita din yung agency. Kaya nasabi ko na mas respeto yung naging effect sa akin o yung at empathy na para bang gusto ko siyang yakapin, no? Si Sunny, no? Mas lumitaw din yung respeto kasi sa ending. Di ba parang ina-engage niya si yung sabi niya sa kanya, you can't really escape, can you? Parang sabi niya, siya naman, that's a very terrible way of looking at it. So, and then he decided na, or sinabi na niya na talagang pumunta ko dito is to find myself and find my mother. So yung respect doon sa, at tapos yung siguro sa huli na lang, like yung mga sa lesbian stories, I think ito yung purpose din itong workshop na mag-produce paano mga ganitong klaseng kwento, lalo sa konteksto na mataas ang rate na ng HIV sa Pilipinas. Tapos may stories na like yung sa Lamyos.
Triggered for me my own concern or research problem about my writing, which yung early work ko talaga, very conventional kasi written within the MFA program. And so it's similar project, no? Kailangan ipakita mo kasi na may natutuhan ka dun sa programa, and therefore my stories I felt were really, trapped in that mode of the modern short story or the American short story basically. Tapos naging teacher ko si Roland doon, at siya lang sa lahat ng faculty ng Lasal, time na yun, ang nagpasok ng postmodern na ideas. And I felt at that time I wasn't ready for those ideas. So ang gusto kong makita, dito sa Ultima Twink, it's my favorite piece in the entire manuscript because it showed for me what I aspire to do in my writing is to be out loud and proud if you're a queer writer. So you parang seeing how I've been passing in order to fulfill the requirements of this literary system. And I'm seeing Adrian in these two pieces. So here's one thing, this conventional, it's passing, paminta. yung isang story, tapos yung Ultima, baklang-bakla na talaga. And it's the triumph of form over, that need to be accepted or to be understood by others. And gusto ko siya. So gusto ko talaga marinig kay Adrian yung impulse doon sa kwento na yun. Saan galing yung kabaklaan doon sa forma na to. And for me, it's really a bravura performance. And it showed me what the genre queer text is. And I really feel envious that you are able to perform it talaga on the page. It's visible. You don't need to read it. You can just, flip through it and see, bakla. No? So, yun yung gusto kong gawin, for myself. Which I know I haven't done, even in my current work. Kasi, hindi pa carry bells. No? So maybe it's because I'm a lesbian and not queer now, parang ganon. So, gusto ko pa rin yun. The other question is for Roland. Kasi kanina pa describe na ito, while the impulse might be postmodern, I want to see it really as a queer text. What makes it a queer text rather than a postmodern text? Or mali ba ako sa assumption na pag queer ang writer ay may forma talaga, or maybe maybe there really isn't a way to write queerly. Talaga bang ito ay postmodern text na katulad ng nung sinusulat ng mga postmodern heterosexual writers? So yun dalawang bagay. So maybe, kaya lang wala tayo.
Meron pang konti, pero in a queer way. In other words, what is queer is extra-textual also, as much as textual. So don't get hung up on questions of form or theme. Think about the politics of interpretation that you as a queer writer will need to mobilize in order that your work be received. Yeah.
It's a reading practice, not just a writing practice.
It's a political set of performances that you enact so that your work will be queer. I had to come out as a queer writer so that everything I wrote, I have to do this. I have to put together a writing workshop on LGBTQ. I have to do queer readings. It's almost endless. You have to bring the queer thing with you. You are not separate from your text. Diba? Suddenly radical. We're ending na eh. So I am telling you that it isn't just the text. It is you. And it is the politics that you embody and live out. Kasi it's so, mag-essentialize tayo. I'm sorry, the postmodern form is not the only queer form. You cannot say that that is it. Na bakla-bakla yung tsura niya. For me, postmodern yung tsura niya. And I would actually say post-colonial. Kasi post-colonial siya eh. Yung moment of seriousness ni Ronald, nasa post-colonial lagi yun. Wala yun sa postmodern. Sa postmodern talagang wala. Meaningless. Yung ano ng postmodern, meaninglessness. What modern writing is the recognition of meaninglessness and fragmentation, but there's the desire to put things together. Like Virginia Woolf, yung mga yan, nagpa-fragment, no? Pero meron pa rin unity na binibigay na nila sa reader to find, no? Sa postmodern, wala. Yun ang difference ng dalawa. But post-colonial, it can look postmodern because it's, the epistemology is non-Western, right? It can draw from alternative epistemologies, but there is a point. And it is normally national liberation. I'm sorry. Post-colonial di ba? Here, it's queer liberation. It's the liberation of the Cozy, no? From his own affliction. Actually, yun ang point ng story. The affliction is his own, it's his own making in a way. He chooses it. Chooses to be crushed by it or not be crushed by it. Si Ultima Twink, that performance is his own subconscious saying, don't be crushed. Diba? Kailangan niya mag-invent na divaspora, na image, outer ego niya yun eh. Na aahunin siya, pulled out of his misery and of his lack of self-worth. So siguro ang ending maganda, I'm thinking about it, is he leaves the job. Parang ending na is, goodbye Ate Charo. I hope
Consider
never to
this my
see you again.
resignation letter.
I hope never to see you again. Kasi inis na pa siya sa elevator, di ba?
In his wife.
So I'm in the where?
I know, sorry, sa window display, the interactive window display. Hindi ko siya nakita in person.
What's to say? Kala ko naman global travel.
So I had a title, but so what? And then in-imagine ko na siya because it's Miles Heiser, and I was like, yung unang inisip ko dito is crossing genres in film. So that was my original orientation for this. But when I transposed it into fiction, I had to change the crossing of the genres. And then, yun na nga, I wanted to justify why there should be a crossing of the genres. And so that's why Chico gets raped because he is processing the entire text is him trying to process the trauma that happened to him. So it really was, it travels. I really want to achieve that idea of empathy for the PLHRPs. I'm actually torn because I write fiction and writing about PLHRPs, a part of me is shouting, why are you writing fiction when you should be writing non-fiction and getting stories of actual PLHRPs? And the answer is selfish because I have a hard time writing non-fiction. And this is how I express it. And I just hope that this project, because my writing can be very solipsistic, and this is my way of not being that. And for my writing to be
train of thought. No, non-fiction.
Yeah,
This is your way not to be solipsistic.
yeah, of my writing to have meaning outside myself. So thank you.